17 minutes after 7 o'clock. Welcome back. You're live on the AM Report. It's great to be in your company. I'm Mayanda Nyati. So Eskom CEO under Ruyter says we will only endure load shedding at least until Saturday, but he's also warned that the risk of load shedding remains until 4,000 to about 6,000 megawatts is added back to the national grid. Back in June, President Ramaphosa announced the threshold for private energy producers at about 100 megawatts, with most of that coming from IPPs, that's independent power producers, as well as mining companies and private households. So how soon will this power actually come online, and will it help to actually prevent these rolling blackouts? For perspective, let's bring in Dr. Chris Haw. He's the chairperson of the renewable energy company, the SOLA Group, and joins us now via our video link. And Dr. Haw, it's great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for making time. I wonder, given the work that you do, if I can begin by just getting your broad stroke take of what you made of yesterday's marathon meeting or briefing. Are you satisfied with the reasons given by the Eskom leadership around why we're still struggling with this problem years after it was initially picked up?
Look, I think Eskom are trying to explain things in the best way that they can. They have a very difficult situation on their hands because there's a legacy problem there, not a problem that's just occurred overnight. I do believe that there are technical constraints on the network, and that the issues that they are explaining are legitimate. However, obviously, what's led us to this problem is systemic and long-term mismanagement of the energy fleet, and also a mismanagement of our energy planning, which doesn't just rest at Eskom, but rests at the door of the Department of Energy and NERSA as well to some extent. So I do think that it's difficult to point fingers at specific people and specific companies at the moment, because this is a problem that's been going on for a long time, and something that as a country and I guess as a government we should have been addressing earlier.
Yeah, you speak about a plan that's currently in place. A lot of talk around the integrated resource plan, which is, I imagine, what you were alluding to. I mean, as far as you're concerned, is this plan even emphasizing the right things when we think about what the solutions might look like in the years ahead?
It is now, but it's taken a long time for us to get there, and it's also very important that the plan remains relevant and updated. Between the years of 2011 and 2019, the plan was not updated, and that's actually the root of the problem, is that we were stuck on an old plan, which was being supported by those with interests in coal and nuclear. And finally, when the plan was updated in 2019, we saw much more forward-thinking allocations to cleaner, cheaper technologies, and also the movement of the licensing threshold that you alluded to earlier. And that has actually resulted in quite a lot of activity in the IPP sector, particularly on projects bilateral projects where private companies like ourselves are selling energy to other private consumers on the network.
Yeah.
And for us, that is actually a really key solution to this problem that we're in, because it's a very fast way to bring more capacity onto the network, and that doesn't only help the particular company that energy is being sold to, but it also alleviates the constraints for everyone on the network, which is our way out of load shedding.
It's interesting you mentioned what you actually do, because I was hoping to speak about that with a bit more detail. So you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the SOLA Group essentially sells power to consumers, but interestingly uses the Eskom grid to do that. In other words, you put power on the grid and your consumers on the other side take that power on, for lack of a better term. How's that actually faring? Are you finding it works?
Yes, we are. We're finding that it's working in South Africa. Eskom is also supporting it, and I think the government's intention to try and create a separate transmission and distribution entity within Eskom is also starting to bear fruit, because the conflict of interest between generation and transmission being removed creates a much easier conversation. That concept of using the electricity network, the infrastructure network, which actually in our country is very well built and advanced, is not something new. It's been championed around the world in most developed markets, where there's a much more easier trade between entities that are connected to the network. And electricity electrons themselves are actually fungible, which means that the exact electron that's being put onto the system at our location, where our site is in the Northern Cape, it doesn't have to be the exact electron that is taken off by a particular off-taker, because those electrons are essentially the same. So it becomes an accounting technical solution whereby all of the energy that's being generated from our facilities and injected onto the network can be allocated to different consumers, and the Eskom or the utility, whichever utility a particular user is connected to, can actually credit the user's meters with the electricity that's been allocated to them from that facility. And that transaction has been happening in countries around the world for a long time in developed electricity markets, which essentially gives customers more choice about what kind of electricity they can buy. And that choice is very important at the moment, because what consumers want is they want stability, they want sustainability in the type of energy that they choose, and they also want it to be cost effective. And all of those things actually are available to consumers here in South Africa if we're able to scale this particular concept that we've started faster.
Right. How do things like the ongoing breakdowns, the issues around ailing infrastructure affect your ability to essentially aid this issue, or to rather provide a solution to this problem? In a context, for instance, when Eskom says the grid is constrained, what does that mean for the type of intervention that you're working on?
Look, our electric grid is an asset which we really need to look after as a country and protect and maintain, and we also need to strengthen it in areas where it needs strengthening. So, we are very cognizant that the role of Eskom is best suited to looking after that infrastructure, focusing on maintaining it and providing that infrastructure as a service to all consumers and generators on the network. And so I think that Eskom's focus going forward, in our opinion, in my opinion, should really be on that infrastructure. That is an asset which it requires a lot of maintenance, it requires a lot of planning about where it should be strengthened, and going forward, it's a very good business model for Eskom, because it allows them to make revenue from every kilowatt hour that's actually moved across the network, regardless of whether it's their generation or another generation. So
in other words, you too are hamstrung by the efficiency of Eskom's infrastructure, essentially.
We are, because there are certain areas in the country where the actual export capacity is being constrained, and those areas actually have the best resource in terms of the renewable energy capacity. So it's extremely important that those areas are the infrastructure exporting energy from that area is enhanced.
Right. Well, thanks very much indeed for your time and helping us understand the work that you do. I mean, there's a whole host of kind of IPP interventions, and it's interesting to learn how you, as an independent power producer, are in some respects providing solutions to the ongoing crisis we're facing. Dr. Chris Haw is the chairperson of the SOLA Group. Once again, thanks very much indeed.